workshop out into 4 main sections, and this is kind of a overview of the different things we're going to cover. Each different section is going to have about a 10-minute break at the end of it, so you can get up, stretch your legs, do what you need to do. Zoom fatigue is real. And so we're going to start off by going over looking at different examples of some library website. We're going to start brainstorming what's going to go on your main page and what it's going to start looking like. Then I'll do a demonstration of kind of just the very basics of how to get content on there, how to add images, adding text and formatting. And then I got a question from someone about how to set up a calendar. So I added a blurb in there for the event manager. And then we'll talk about how to format the sidebar on there and different ways that you can kind of spice up your homepage, different layouts that you can use, and how themes work in WordPress. And a theme basically just is the way that your website looks. And then the biggest place where people start slipping up is how to set up a maintenance schedule for your website so that content stays fresh and people have something new to look at when they go to the website. All right, so I've already asked this. I asked Tammy to send this out in the invite to find out if there was anything that you wanted to get out of the workshop. But is there anything that you've thought of since then? And if you can think of anything, either unmute yourself or put it into the chat. If I don't get anything, we'll just move right along. And I'll give you a second to think about that. And if you are newer to Zoom, you can find the chat by hovering your mouse down toward the bottom of the screen. A little panel will pop up that says chat, and you can click it open and enter your question. If you are using an iPad or another device to access Zoom, then the menu is going to be across the top of the iPad. You can tap it open, find the More button, and open the chat to access any of the discussion questions or respond to any questions. And does anyone have any questions about how to use the Zoom chat? I'd never want to assume that everyone knows how to use it, but it's pretty popular, so most people usually do. But if you have any questions about how to use the Zoom features that I'm talking about, then I'll give a little review at the start of the shop, and then you can ask questions as you go along. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is look at some examples. And while you look at this, think about what you think a website should do, what's the purpose of it, and what you want your library website to convey to people. So just keep a mental note of this because we're going to talk about this in just a minute. All right, so these are some common different website formats that have come up. This first one is actually shared on a city website. This is one of the most common examples I've seen of where libraries have put their website. There are pros and cons to this. Hosting your website with the city doesn't allow you to put as much stuff on there, and it kind of restricts the layout, but you can kind of get the basics and the major information out there. So they've put in information about how to get a library card. They've put in information about different collections they have, their makerspace, and different classes and events they have coming up. And so this is another one that is hosted by a city. And you can also see that the menu can start to get a little confusing because if you're newer to websites, you don't always know where to look. So hosting your own website like they did in St. Edward, and this is one that actually runs through the Nebraska Libraries on the Web project. And so you can start to see some of the information that they're putting out there and what they wanted to feature and how this website is going to look to. This is one that I recently formatted for them. And this is kind of an example of how you can feature all of your different services and draw attention to them on the website so people know exactly what you offer and what's available to them right when they go on the page. And this is using the Nirvana theme. The Nirvana theme is just a WordPress layout that shows what your website is going to look like, where your menu is going to show up, and where your header is going to show up. This is also the Nirvana theme, but it uses a different homepage style. So this rotating image slider is a really popular thing. You can customize the different image that goes behind it and give a little blurb of a program that's coming up or a story hour. And you can even take photos of your story hour and put a featured image behind this. And then click through these to find out what's new, what you want to feature, and things you want to draw attention to. And if you have any COVID regulations that you want people to really pay attention to, the homepage is also a good place to put that. And there's also different content that is just permanently featured on this homepage. And there are different ways you can configure that and different ways that you can get people to know what's going on. So I'm going to, before you can kind of get a really good feel for what you want your website to do, it really helps to know what WordPress calls all of these different sections. So this is, I'll put in a little blurb about how you can translate what you're seeing here into what you're going to see in the admin panel. And so up here is the header, which this is the image that you're going to put across the top of pretty much all of your pages. This is the site title, which is usually well, it's the name of your library. The site identity is usually the city that you're in. And you've got your main menu, and each one of these menu options connects over to a different page. And you can also have a blog, like a blog posting that's on your home page. So whenever you set up this home page, which is the first thing that you click open when you open up this link, it's kind of what you want to draw people to attention to. So you've got pages, which are these, and posts is your blog. And so let me go back to the home here. And you'll see that on this format, this home screen doesn't have a sidebar on it, but your sidebar is called a widget in WordPress. So all of your widgets are on the side here, and some themes will also let you put widgets on the side up here, and some of them will also let you put widgets in the footer, which I did here. So in the footer, you usually have your contact information. A lot of times you have your hours, and this is just a fun picture. So these are the most common things that people go to your website to try to find. So that's why it helps to have it just on every single page. And sometimes it's also on this sidebar here. So people know exactly where you are, how to get a hold of you, and when they can come in. And you can also, I made these online catalog buttons and overdrive buttons so that these click directly to the login page. So if you don't already have these are a good thing to add on there. All right, so what we're going to do now is start a brainstorming session to find out what you actually want on your library website. This is going to be where you start making your plan for your library to say, this is the list of stuff I want, this is what I've got already, and this is what I'm going to add in. So for the sake of time, I'm going to do this as kind of a shared document thing. And then I'll share this document out. So get ready to unmute yourself or access the chat. And let me open up my shared doc. Oh, I'm gonna need to minimize here. And here it is. So I'm going to share this link out. And I will change it so that you can edit it. Done. And copy link. Now I'm going into the chat function, and this link is going to be in here. If you are not comfortable using the Google Doc sheet, then you can just give a shout out or enter in the chat what you want me to add on here. So what do you actually want on your library website? Is it going to be services? Is it going to be upcoming events? Let's start making a list so everyone has kind of a point of reference of what their website's going to look like. And I have an eye on the chat if anyone is entering things in there. And for instructions for using Google Sheets, if you haven't used it before, you can just click open that link that's in the chat. When you click it open, you'll be able to edit it just like a Microsoft Word document, just in case you haven't used the Google Sheets before or Google Docs. All right, so I've got in the chat, which I will add here, basic information. So contact info, hours of operation, policies, upcoming events, special collections. And let's see what else is in the chat here. So we've got services, library services, and we've got calendar again. So I'll put upcoming events / calendar. And anything else in here. COVID policies. Oh, looks like I might be typing over someone here. Now it looks like we just really mean COVID policies. And I will stop typing for a second here in case anyone wants to add anything themselves. Okay, let me add new reads. That was in the chat. Links to sign up to Facebook, social media. And catalog, overdrive links. Oh, friends of the library. I like that one. And let me see what else is in chat here. Looks like we got the biggies here. And is there anything else that people want to add on here? And I will keep this list open because we might add on to it as we go along. Staff info. Book club. I'm going to scroll back up in the chat and see if I missed anything in here. Library board. Yep. Catalog overdrive. Oh, so it looks like we've got a pretty good list here. So we'll add on to this if we can think about anything now or in the future. Feel free to keep this open. I'll keep a tab open here. And we're going to use this as a reference point to figure out what your library website's going to look like, what you need to put on there. And then we're going to talk about how to organize all this stuff in a little bit. So now I'm going to open up. So I have a second monitor on the other side here. This is where I'm kind of keeping my workshop agenda so I can pull all my documents open and everything like that. So if you see me looking off into space, I'm actually looking at that. All right, so now up next, we have this whole list together. Now I'm going to open up a new document. It's called the Navigation Menu Worksheet. And we're going to start organizing this information so that it's not just kind of a massive list of chaos. And I'll wait for people to type a couple other things in here before I start into the next thing. All right, so I've got the navigation menu. And I'm going to pull this into the shared screen. And I'm going to turn this into a side-by-side so you can see them both on here. So we'll get one here. And then I'll pull one over here. Shrink it down a little, and now we can see our list. Okay, so when you're trying to figure out what your navigation menu is going to look like and how to organize it, so your navigation menu is this menu straight across the top here. But there's only so much space in here, so a lot of times you have to turn these menus into a drop-down menu and start to organize and categorize things so you don't have 3 or 4 rows worth of stuff up here. And sometimes you might only have a single row, other times you'll have this drop down. So that's what we're going to do now, is figure out what to put where. So the way I usually recommend that people do this is by starting to brainstorm these different topics, which we've already done in our first step here. And then you start to organize these topics, because if we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 tabs of this across the top, it gets a little much. So these are some common different website categories that are used to label drop-down menus. I put this in as a reference point in case you want to be able to use this later. And I'm going to share this out in case you want this as a reference point. This is going to go into the chat, but we're going to do this as a group, so you don't have to worry about this now, but just if you want it later. Navigation menu activity. So you've got it there, and now we're going to do it. So here we're going to put all of our topics that we brainstormed over here. Now we're going to attach a category onto this side here. So you can start organizing this. So let's put in new reads. It's going to look like a chaotic mess for a second, but then it'll all come together. Facebook, social media, catalog, staff info, book club, overdrive, basic information, contact info, hours, policies, upcoming events, special collections, library services, I already did that. COVID stuff. Friends of the library. Board. Library history. All right, so the new reads, would you say that that is something that would be its own menu heading, or do you think that's a category that would fall under something else? And you can vote yes or no in the chat. So is it going in main topic or is it a drop down? And kind of a litmus test of what you want to start asking yourself is, what is the most important thing that people are looking for when you go on their website? Is new read something that people would immediately click on, or is it just kind of secondary information that's not quite as important? Okay, so we've got 2 votes for a main topic. Got 3 for a main heading. Let's go with main heading. So the category is now new reads. And so the Facebook and social media, oh, we've got 1 vote for a drop down with the materials. And that is also an option. You can put things in 2 different locations on your website because people think differently when they're trying to find stuff. So you can make it a main site, you can make it a main link, and then you can also make it a drop down, and you can also pop it into services or you're in your sidebar. And so now with the Facebook and social media, would you actually make a separate page that says what your Facebook is? Would you put it into a sidebar? Would you make it a little link across the top of your screen? Do we have some votes? Got 1 for sidebar, sidebar, sidebar. Sweet. All right, so let's sidebar it. Popular vote, sidebar it. So catalog link, I'm not going to make you vote on that because it's just kind of true. A lot of people put it in the sidebar or they put it in an icon in the main menu. Staff info, usually that goes under About Us. Book club info, pretty safe bet, that's events. Overdrive is a sidebar or services page. Contact info usually goes under a contact us page. Hours goes under contact us, or you can also put it in sidebar. So policies is kind of one of the big contenders as to whether it's going to be a main tab or if it goes under About Us. So based on what you've kind of done before and what you might want to think about organizing it, would you say that this is its main page? Or do you think it's a drop down under About Us for policies? Oddly enough, there's actually been some pretty heated debates about where this goes. You'd be surprised. So we've got some main tabbers and some About Us. Main tab. So let's say policies. And there's been also kind of a tiebreaker that has, so if you have separate individualized policies that are longer, you can also make a policies tab and then do a drop-down menu that says computer use, collection dev, or you can say like the different individual policies. If you have your policies in one document, or if you have a link over to a Google Doc or something like that, I've seen them put it under About Us. So that's just kind of the different things that you think about when you're trying to figure out where to put stuff and why, and how people are going to find it. Or About Us. And I'm just going to make a note under here because I've gotten questions about it. Separate drop down for individual policies. I did not spell that right. There we go. And upcoming events, there's a few different ways you can do it. You can make an actual physical calendar that people are going to look at and just kind of plop that on the screen. I've seen people use the event calendar function that is in WordPress that you can load all of your events. That supports recurring events, and I'll show you how to do that later. Or you can make a PDF of it. You can make it in Google Docs or Google Sheets, or just make a table version of it, save it as a PDF, and embed the PDF into your calendar page. And that's probably the quickest way to do it if you're already using a word processor already. And you can also you can sync it in through a Google Calendar if you happen to already be using Google Calendar for other stuff. So there's different ways to do it based on what your community already uses, what your preferred tool is, and just however you want to do it. So I'll demonstrate the one tool in there. Just know that you have options. And a lot of people just put this under events. If you do have specific descriptions of recurring events, like a story hour or an economic development meeting, or just something that happens regularly, you can also make a separate drop-down menu that has the different events that are specific in there. You can also take pictures of those events and kind of feature what it looks like, so people have an idea of what they're getting into and what they might want to explore and try out. And special collections. Oh, one thing that I'll add in here is genealogy. Hey, I spelled it right. And so if you have genealogy resources, or you want to add genealogy resources, that can either be a main tab, or it can go under a drop down under services. So if your library is all about genealogy, it's one of the main draws, make it a main tab. And if it's just kind of like a secondary thing that people ask for once in a blue moon, pop it under services. And so what kind of special collections do you want to try to feature? And you can put that in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, whichever you prefer. So I've got local history. And I'm going to make like a little bullet list under here. Church records. I did just make a little panel for a high school yearbook. So yearbooks. Wood cutting. Oh, those are cool. Oh, what is that? The collection of cake pans, is there like a specific term for that? Or is it just like, do you just call it the cake pan collection? Or I know I've called it different things, but what do you call it? Die cuts, cake pans. I love a good cake pan. I do. And all right, library of things. I just went to the Computers and Libraries conference, had a thing to set up library things. I always wanted to try that. It's kind of fun. I spelled cemetery wrong. I always want to put an A in it and it's an E. Oh well. So with the local history, you can either put that under, there are some libraries that I've seen make like a local history tab on its own, and local resources and state resources. So I'll put local history, insert row below, local history, and local resources. So that's kind of up to you as to what you want to feature and how you want to feature it. Is if you want like a local history thing, and then you can pop a genealogy thing if you have local genealogy. You can pop in local resources, like if there are local schools and events that you want to put in there. And so you can do like a whole local history tab that has a drop down and all the info about it. Or you can put that under the About Us. Or you can just put it under Special Collections. So the question is like, what is the term that people are going to make the connection of what it is when they see it? Like cake pans, I know exactly what I'm getting into when I read it. Like if I click cake pans, I'm gonna hope I get cake pans. If I don't, that'd be weird. But when you click on Special Collections, what are you getting? So it's like, what's going to make people click on that term? And if you want, you can also just call it, I feel like more people know what Library of Things is now. And if they don't know about it, it's like a weird enough term that they click on it just to find out. Like I know I did. So I mean, if you put Library of Things in there, I think you'd get people to open it up. So you can call it a tab called Library of Things. What would you call it? Like if you had a collection of one of these, would you just call it what it is? Or if you have multiple things, what would you categorize it under? And you can put that in the chat if you have any recommendations or votes on here, and I'll pop it on the screen. Believe it or not, this is like half of what I do in a day is just to figure out what to call things. It's a thing. Okay, so use the actual term. Cake pans. Or put it under local resources. So Library of Things, use the actual term, put it under local resources. Any other votes? So I'll say, we can add to this later if you think of something. So we'll kind of put a pin in this for a second, but know that it's there if you want to add stuff. And we're going to go to library services. So the next big question is, which library services should we actually put on here? And how should we organize it? So I'll start us off with print and fax. Color or black and white. Because really, that's one of the biggest, when I worked the circulation desk many moons ago, the biggest question I got was, do you have just color printing or do you have just black and white, or do you do color? And do you have fax services? Oh, Notary of the Public. Oh, scanning, yes. Old laminate. 3D printer. No, I'll put 3D printer. Would 3D printer go under library services or a makerspace tab? I guess it depends on what else you have. Like if it's like, if you have a printer and then you have a 3D printer, but that's like the only equipment you have, it would probably go under library service. But if you have other makerspace stuff, it might go under makerspace. It's toss up. Wi-Fi, proctoring. Wireless printing. I'll put wireless printing under print and fax. Black and white. Wireless. Proctoring. Interlibrary loan. Study rooms. Meeting rooms. Oh, you see. I saw a few more come in the chat. I'm trying to grab them. Got that. Okay, so multiple tabs. The use book nook. Portable hotspots. Newspapers. I'll just add in magazines just because I'm thinking about it. Ebook, audiobook. Digital newspaper. So then the question is, do you put the digital stuff in the regular library services, or do you put it in online resources or digital services? And it kind of comes down to how big of a collection of it do you have? If you just have the newspaper archives but no other digital resources, do you make a separate tab? Or do you just kind of like plop it into library services because it would look weird just on its own? Or if you have like a bunch of different things that are available, then do you separate them out or just keep them all under library services? Oh, having it in a sidebar as a link would be good. Thanks, Jennifer. And oh, databases too. So like Nebraska Access and Nebraska Memories and stuff. Nebraska Access. Bilingual services. Cool. So I'll add in here, just because I didn't think about it before, below maker spaces. And so maker spaces, I could see it going under library services or its own thing. And I'll also add in digital services. Would you call it digital resources, digital services, or How do you call your digital resources on your website? Because I've seen it a bunch of different ways, and I'm not sure if I have a favorite way. While you think about that, I will sip my tea out of my Ninja Turtle mug. I guess I'd probably call it a digital resource, maybe. Digital collection, digital catalog. So I'll just put it under collection, digital catalog, digital resources. And it's mostly like if people saw it, would they know what that term meant to click on it? Yeah. So again, you can put your digital resources under a library services tab or under a digital collection tab. And this would be maker spaces. Oh, and links in sidebar. You can also put it in both just to give it more visibility. Would anyone call library services anything besides library services? How do you label that on yours? It might just be library services. So the average drop down is about 6 drops down. But if you do have like a lot of vital information, then you can definitely make it longer. The reason that I made it a recommendation of 6 is because it looks different on a mobile phone. So when you try to open up the menu on your mobile phone and you start having multiple drop downs under drop downs under drop downs, it can kind of get hard to scroll through that menu on the tiny phone screen. But if it's important, it's important. Oh, library services, services. Oh, one thing I forgot to put in here, print collections. Kids, adult, large print, and YA. Pretty sure people assume those are there in the library, but it doesn't hurt. And you can also put the featured materials under a new read section, which yeah, we already have this up here. So I've also seen new reads called featured materials, upcoming, or I'm sure there's other terms that I'm just not thinking of. New arrivals. Artwork. So artwork could probably go under, I'd probably say special collections or just as a clickable tab or a link in the sidebar. And I would recommend making it like a clickable image instead of just a link that says artwork. So if you have a like a photo example of one of the pieces, then you can grab that photo and just kind of pop it into the side and say click to open or something like that. And that just kind of draws the eye a little better. I am pretty sure I'm going to bake a cake after this because I'm thinking about it now. Maybe muffins. I don't know. All right, so we've got, I'm just double checking the chat to make sure I didn't miss any questions or recommendations on here. Yes, Ninja Turtle cake pan. I have the Ninja Turtle waffle maker. It's awesome. It has like the little TMNT face on the top. It's turtle-tastic. All right, so we've got library services or services. And COVID stuff usually on the home page, or you can also add a link in the heading. I'm really hoping that soon we don't even need it at all. But for the time being, homepage or COVID link on the header. And so friends of the library I would probably say under about us, but where do people put the friends of the library and the board info? Library history. So library card, how to use the library. And so we can add a how to use the library, getting a library card. Databases. Back. So if you get a lot of questions about it, I would almost make it its own tab. How to use the library is kind of a longer phrase, but can anyone think of like a shorter phrase to use besides that kind of says, this is how you use our library? Info on programs. So programs you could probably put under the events category, or you can make it programs and events so people know that it's both of them. It kind of depends on the terminology that people are used to. Like if you call it a program all the time or if you call it an event all the time. So pick what works. And programs, events, and events. And so there's a library history, local history. Is there a category that already works for it? I mean, you could probably put it under About Us, but was there another one? Probably, would you add a local resources page or like a local, does anyone have like a local resources tab with a drop down or a local history? And what do you call that? All right, so let's call it local resources. Insert county here, resources. And just, I'll call it etc. because I can't think of what else to call it. Resources. Oh, I meant county, not country. That's a little too broad. Let me just fix that. And you can put genealogy as genealogy or local resources or library services. Library tutorials. I don't know. So that's kind of how you would organize out your menu. And so if you're wondering more or less which features to service, we have kind of a good brainstorm list going here. So if you have any of these services, feel free to pop them in. And so at this point, I'd like to actually give you a little bit of a break because we've been going for a while. So we will start back up at 2:05. And now new reads and other goodness has pushed these other ones down onto the second row because this since whenever you have a longer title, it automatically pulls that full title into your menu. And whenever you have a longer title, it's naturally going to take up more space. So that's why I was trying to find a shorter title for how to use your library or how to learn your library tutorials, whatever you want to call it. And so now we're going to go back into our dashboard. So whenever you view a page, you can go back up into this left corner, go to the name of your site and go back to dashboard. And then this will usually take just a second to load back to where we were. And then I'll go back into the pages, all pages, and I'm going to reopen that page that we were just playing with. And so we'll go into new reads and other goodness, go into edit. And you can also set different, so this URL slug is the URL that people will type into their computer to access this page. So you can also change the URL in this permalink setting. So if you don't want to make people type all those hyphens and stuff, you can also just change it to new reads and make it one word. and then that's all they have to type in to be able to get to that page. So if you like to direct people to a website by actually saying libraries.ne.gov/new reads, then this is the easier option if you want to do it that way. And this is where you would enable or disable the comments on the page. So if you want to have a little comment box on the bottom that says, give me feedback about what you found on this page, you would put a checkbox here, but that also opens you up to more spam. So you usually want to uncheck this and make sure that this is not checked so that you don't get all those spam comments and stuff. And if you want to be able to use so you see that this is all on a single column here. And it's using the default template, which means that your sidebar is going to show up on this page. If you want to embed a PDF and you want that to take up the full width, let's go into all pages. I'm going to leave the page without saving it. And I'm going to show you how to embed a PDF that will take up the entire width of the screen instead of having that column, the sidebar on the column. So we'll do add new. Then I'm going to do policies. Then we'll add a block, go to the PDF embedder. It'll say click here to open media library to select a PDF. We'll just click in here, then upload a PDF. Or here, I have a random one loaded in here, so I'll just use that. So this was a PDF that I had loaded in, and you can also go to upload files and grab one if you don't already have one. Select it. So when you first load it in, all it's going to do is have PDF and then a link to where WordPress stored that PDF. Now you want to click on page on the right-hand side here and go down to page attributes and template. And instead of default template, you can say one column, no sidebar, and then we'll publish it immediately. Then I'll view the page. I right-clicked on view page. I'll say open link in new tab so we can just click right back to where we were before. So now this is taking up the entire width of the page instead of having this sidebar on the side here. And in comparison, I'll show you what it looks like with the sidebar. So we go into page attributes, one column, no sidebar, go back to the default template, go to update for it to accept the change. And then I'll go back into view page. I'll right click and open up in the new link. So if you have the default template with the sidebar, it'll squish it in with the sidebar, and this will just be a little bit smaller. So it's easier to have it without the sidebar when you have smaller lettering, or if you have an image or an instruction sheet that you want people to be able to really see on the full page. And it's also easier to see this on mobile-friendly devices. Because if you have the sidebar on here still, on a mobile phone, you'll see the PDF on top. Then when you keep scrolling, you'll see the sidebar options underneath the PDF. And you don't always need to have that available. So sometimes it's easier to just take that off of there so people can see the whole thing. And this would also be an option for if you're going to be using a PDF to embed your calendar. So if you are putting a PDF calendar up here, I would recommend using it full screen. So now I'll close this on here. And then I'm going to open up a new page and go into all pages. Sorry, all pages. This will just take a second to load. And I'm going to add a new page to play with. eventually. So one of the most common things you'll probably want to do is add a paragraph that has some text in it and then be able to tuck an image in the upper left corner so that the text is still wrapping around it. So that's kind of a common page layout that's a little bit weird to do, but it is possible with this layout. So I'm just going to call this test image. And I'm going to copy and paste some random text on here, just so you get an idea of what it'll look like. And I'm going to grab this little bit here. So there's a website called Lorem Ipsum Text. It just generates random text that you can copy and paste. So if you want to see what a layout looks like, just go to lipsum.com and you can copy and paste text just to test out a layout. So now you have your text here. We're going to add a new block by going to this plus sign in the upper left corner to add a block. Then add your image, which is going to be in the media section. So we'll click on image. And then I'm going to go into my media library to grab an image that's already loaded in here, just as an example. And I'll grab this book and I'll select it. And so you can resize it by clicking and dragging these little circle icons on the side, and you can resize it. So now to get this image to pop up here, you go into this alignment. So it says change alignment, click it open and align left. Then we'll drag it up here. And I'll move it up a little more. There. So it's a little weird the way they set it up, but it is possible to put it up there. And you can also shift the location of where it shows up just by using these up-down arrows for where it's located. This top section is probably the most common place for it to be located. So I would probably just put it there. And then you can resize it to the size you want it to be. So add your text, grab a new block, add your image, and use the up and down arrows to move it where you want it to be. And align it at the left or right, depending on where you want it. And then you can, there's also additional block options on the right-hand side here. So whenever you have a block selected, there's going to be additional setting options on the right. If you don't see this menu popping up, you can click on this settings icon. So when you close this, that menu closes, pop it open, and the menu appears back. So every so often, this will disappear for some random reason, and that's how you would get it back. And you can also change your settings a little bit just by going into rounded edges. So you'd be able to change the look of it a little bit. And then this is kind of the same drop-down version of this clickable here. And the alt text is if someone's using a screen reader or for whatever reason this is not able to load, you can grab the alt text so that text appears in place of the image. So you can say the book of 2 Ways by Jodi Picoult. And now this will show up if for any reason that image isn't able to load. And then you can also manually change the size of that image by using the width and height, but I usually just use the drag and drop because I'm more of like a visual instead of like a precision when I put images just inside of like a paragraph like that. All right, and the only time that I use the actual width and height is when I'm formatting an image that's going to go into the sidebar, because it's easier to have an actual full an image size that's designated if you're putting it over there. And so let's go back here. And then you can also on any page, you can change this so that it fills up the entire page, or it has, you can also add sidebars so that there's one on the left and one on the right on some pages, or just one sidebar on the right side for other pages. All right, so now I'm going to publish this. We'll do it immediately. And then I'll let you know what that looks like on an actual page. And there we go. All right, so let me start yet a new page. And yes, I am going to delete all these random pages that I just made, but let me grab a new one eventually. So let's do an add a new page. I'm going to go into add a random title. Random title. I'm going to add a block on here. And so you can also do columned layouts. So we'll add columns on here. And you can do a 2-column layout. So you can also add additional blocks inside of these sections. So when you click on this plus sign, it'll open up that same menu again. And you can add in an image on this side with the media library. So I clicked on image, media library, and we'll grab this image. And then you can say, you can click on the add block on this right side, add in some text. And you can also add in a heading. We'll hit the plus sign, go into heading, Nook. And voila. So if you want to make any of these a link out to another page or an internal page in your site, you can also highlight some text and go to this link to click the link. And then we'll go to, I'll link it over to this random Lipsum page that I use. So now you can click this to open it up in a new tab. And that means that when people click on this, it will open a separate tab so that people can click back into your library tab once they're done checking out the Lipsum. And so we'll go to submit. And now this will link over to that Lorem Ipsum page. All right, so are there any layouts or features that people had questions about or wanted to learn more about? And basically it's, did you see anything on a website that you want to see if there's a way that you can do it yourself? And if not, we'll move on to sidebars before we have kind of a quick break. And then in the next section, we'll start kind of workshopping a little bit more about what you might want to put into your sidebar and how you want to format your homepage, because that's probably one of the most important things that people are going to be seeing on your website. So we've got, I'm checking the chat to see if there's anything specific that people wanted to learn about. I kind of went over the ways that you can add new blocks. And that's probably one of the biggest things is just knowing how this block system works. And so a question about how to update pages like the new reads. And so, yes, I can show you how to pop open pages and do an update. And so we have a question about the calendars. All right. So does anyone want to see a demo of Elementor, which is that advanced layout thing? Yay? Nay? Did you fall asleep? All right. I'll do an Elementor just for fun. Okay. So I'm going to go back into pages, all pages. I'll leave the page. So I'll show you how a lot of people like to do the layout. So Vicky had the question about the updating pages and how to do the new reads feature. So I had to show you how to do the image gallery and the regular editor. Now I'm going to show you kind of an example of a new reads page that I did using that advanced layout feature. And it's not too bad to use. So I'm going to go into this image carousel that I had formatted before, and I'll go into edit. So when you open up a page with Elementor, you'll see that this is all it'll show you. So you'll want to click on edit with Elementor, and that's going to open up your Elementor page. And this will just take a second here. So this is another example of how that image carousel could be formatted. So instead of having rows of images stacked on top of each other, this is a scrolling layout that has the arrows that let you navigate between them. And it also has the dots along the bottom to show how many different images are available in this carousel. So this is an option for being able to automatically rotate through different options. So Vicky, to answer your question, this is one of the blocks that was used in a new reads option. So you can go into this image carousel, and since it's already set up on your page, you can open up that Elementor layout just by clicking open that button. You'll get here, and then you'll be able to click on one of these images and then click on this left-hand side where it says 8 images selected, and then find this little edit button. It's like a little pen icon. When you click it open, there is an edit gallery button, and you can remove the different images just by clicking the X sign. And then you can add to gallery on the left-hand side. And you'll want to upload some files. We'll select the files. And let's see if I have any other book cover images. I think I have that book of two ways that I had grabbed before. So we'll open it. And if there are any other images or featured books that you want to put in there, you would just load them all in there. And then once this loads in, then the add to gallery button will pop up and it'll load in here. You'll go to insert gallery. And now you have the new book featured at the end. And you can also clear cut all the images on there just by going into this. When you hover over it, grab this little pen icon and you can clear cut your entire image gallery and replace it with something new. All right. So if you want to add a new image carousel, there'll always be this little box down here that says that has the plus sign or the file, the add template sign. You click on the circle, add plus sign. It'll ask you what kind of layout you want to use. And this carousel is using the full width layout. So I click that first rectangle. And then we click on the gray plus sign that's inside the block that was just added. So that plus sign, and then we have the carousel. I just searched for carousel and then drag and drop the image carousel inside of that new block. And then when you click on here, so if you click inside the block itself, it really doesn't do much. But when you go to the images selected on the left-hand side, you can hit the plus sign, and that's how you would add in your materials. So these were already loaded into my media library, but you can also upload new files to grab new book covers or any other featured materials. Then you can create a new gallery and insert the gallery. And so then you want to format these. By default, it's going to format as a thumbnail, which is this tiny little square thing. So you can go to the image size on the left-hand side and go to medium to make them larger, or you can make them as large as you possibly can. And they'll kind of squish together like that. I just happen to like the look of this a little better. It looks neater to me. So I just put it like that. And you can also change the number of slides that show at one time. So instead of having all three, if you have a larger image, you can just do one. Or if you have two slightly larger images, you can do two, or the rotating three. And instead of advancing one at a time, you can also make it refresh all three of them at one time. And that way it changes the number of pages that are available, but it also makes it a little harder to navigate through them. So I usually just advance it one at a time. And so you see that on the top here, I made this arrow a bright red, but on the bottom here, this one is like a light gray that you can barely even see. So I went over into the style options, and so there's the option for the arrows where I clicked it over to go to the outside. So it shifts it over out a little bit more. I made it the largest size possible, so you can see that it expanded out. And then I changed the color of it to that bright red, just so it's really obvious that it's there and it's a navigation button. Then you can click this menu to close that again. And then the dots, I kept it on the outside so that it doesn't push into the image itself. I made the dots as large as they possibly could be, but I kept those at a black color because it's already still pretty easy to see. And then if you want to pull out additional featured images here, you can add another block down at the bottom that has a plus sign. And then you can change it to have that 2-column thing. So that on the left side, you can put the image, and on the right side is going to be the description of what it's all about. So you just hit the plus sign, and this is exactly like that to the default editor that I just demonstrated. We'll hit the plus sign, grab the image, drag it and drop it, and then I'll click on this left-hand side to grab an image. I'll grab this Ann Hillerman, insert the media, hit the plus sign, and grab a text editor. And now if you click on this text over here, it's not going to get you very far. It wants you to edit all of your text on this left side over here. So you can change this from a paragraph into a heading, and upcoming materials, or you can just call it the title of the book, Rock with Wings. And I'll turn this into a heading and insert description of book, paragraph, adult fiction. Of course, that'll look a little different when you actually have the full paragraph there. But then you can also add another column here and do the next book and the next book and the next book. All right, does anyone have any questions about Elementor or how any of the layout stuff works? Well, let's take a second to sip my tea. So the slideshow option is pretty similar, but it uses a plugin feature. So this slideshow was added in through Elementor and through WordPress pretty recently, but the slideshow, and let me go back into so to get out of this section, you go into the upper left-hand corner and go into exit dashboard and leave page. And eventually it actually loads. So there is a slideshow plugin, and there are a couple of them on here. There is the Smart Slider and the slideshows. So I'll open the Smart Slider plugin because this is a more recent one that is being updated continually. And this is a way that you can add a slider into your sidebar. So if you want the slider inside your sidebar, you would have to use the plugin because there is not yet a feature that will let you add a widget that has a slide bar without this plugin. And let me go into the settings. And this is where you would add in your, like how quickly it rotates around. It'll add in where you're able to place it and who's able to add in sliders. And it'll also let you set whether it is like a portrait, which is that long, tall rectangle, or the landscape, which is the wide, squat rectangle. And it'll let you show like how it will look in mobile versus tablet versus desktop. So it basically makes it responsive so that your slider changes settings as it shifts from one screen size to another. And dashboard. This is taking an incredibly long time to load today. So when you go into the dashboard, you can add in a new project and it'll ask you to create a new project. You can make your slider, and we're just going to make kind of just a random simple slider. And new reads, create. And you would add slides for each different image that you want to rotate through here. And so really the main difference is if you want to put content on your main page or in a blog posting, it's easier to use the carousel slider that's in Elementor. If you want to put your slider in the sidebar widget area, the only way to do it is using this plugin. And they're updating WordPress, so that might change soon, but this is the information I have now. And there's also so once you've added in the slides in here, you would copy and paste this short code down here into the widgets in your sidebar. And that is going to be the demonstration that I will do next. And I have a question in here, which is, if you use Elementor, can you still add a URL link to Amazon? And I guess how would you, is it just in the middle of a paragraph? Is it a clickable image? And in both cases, yes. I guess I would mainly need to know within the slideshow option. So let me go back into Elementor. I'll go into my, so the weird thing about that is that you can have people click on any image in the carousel, but all the images would click over to the same link, which I feel like is weird, but it's how they set it up. So let me go into pages, all pages. And you can also customize your slideshow, your image itself in the media library so that when you click on it on any page where it's loaded, it will click over to that page. So you could actually do it that way too. Let me go to the image carousel. In Slideshow, I add a link to the book title. So when you click on the book's image, it takes you to Amazon. Perfect. Okay. So let me double check this and I'll make sure that this is still true. But so here there is a link option. You can put your link to Amazon, but this would make it so that any one of these images you clicked on would go here. But what I think you want to do is I'm going to close out of this Elementor. I'll leave the page. It's only asking me that because I opened it and it wants to know if I want to save any updates before I leave, but I don't. So you can go into media and library. Yeah, waiting for it to load. And we'll just assume that this is, you can do this with pretty much any image, but edit more details. And alternative description. And a custom URL. So the page links to over here. And of course, I don't have your Amazon link, but when you find it, you'd put it over there. And let me go back up here. And I'm going to go to edit image just to show a couple of the things here. So there are also options so that you can find out how big an image is, because every so often in WordPress, it'll ask you to use a really specific image size to be able to know that it will fit and where it will fit, especially in that header image. So if you want to know how big an image is, you can load it into your media library and then go open up that image and edit it. And then it'll tell you exactly how big it is. And you can also shrink it down and crop it. So if you want to crop it, you would just click crop and then you can clip it down. It doesn't work so well with a book cover, but with other images, it works well. And then you can go hit the enter key on your keyboard and it'll crop down. And then you can update it to save that cropped image. All right, and do we have any other questions so far about any of the features that we've gone over so far? You can, so what's easier to do is you can, instead of cropping it, I'm going to cancel that crop and then I'll edit the image. And so there are thumbnail settings so that you can change it from regular size down to thumbnail size, and it will auto crop it. So sometimes it'll just shrink it down smaller, and sometimes it will trim it the top and bottom off. So that will just automatically just do it for you. But if you want it to be trimmed in a specific way, then you would actually want to upload a second copy of it and then crop the second copy and title it like cropped darling dahlias. That is harder to say than I thought it would be. But you just basically need to upload a second one if you still want to be able to use the full image in one place and thumbnail in another. But you might be able to cheat and just use the thumbnail down here. All right, do we have any other questions in here? I don't see any cropping up. So let me go back into my agenda, make sure I didn't miss anything so far. All right, so let's take another 10-minute break here. And we're going to get started at 3:12. And then we'll go over how to use the events manager. And then we'll start going over the homepage and what you might want to put on there and some different layout options. And then we'll do a brief touch over on changing your theme and which theme works best for responsive layout. And break. So when you are back and settled in, if you could let me know in the chat, and then we will get started with the next segment. And just a fun fact, I just opened up a package from Amazon because I ordered 5 pounds of soy wax so I can make candles this weekend. And 5 pounds of wax is a lot more wax than I thought it would be. Fun fact. And I'm still waiting for a few more people to let me know that they are ready to go and sitting back here. So we'll just give it just another minute or two. And if you could just let me know when you are ready in the chat. Otherwise, you might have just gone to the circulation desk. Who knows? All right, so I am just going to get started here. So we kind of went over how to make a page and add content onto your website. And in the first section of it, we went over which kind of content you might want to add and how you can do that. So I'm going to open up this navigation menu that we put together before, and let's grab some of the things that we labeled sidebar. So we'll start building that out. And I'm just going to make a separate list here. So let's run through this whole thing and grab out things that we called sidebar. And I'm going to grab my Post-it just because it's easier that way. So I've got, and this is actually how I plan out a lot of my different websites, is I make this massive list and then I just pull things out and organize them later. So in this one, we're going to add a Facebook social media button. So Facebook, and then a link to the catalog, and an overdrive button. Then hours and contact. And let's see what else is sidebar. I think some people said they put some of these library services in the sidebar too. And you can put in the chat if there's anything else that you usually put in your sidebar on your website. Digital services, so Nebraska access. And databases. And I might have missed some on my list, but this is a pretty good start. And then I'll also show you how to add a calendar plugin. Overdrive and calendar. All right, so let's get started with how you can actually make this happen on your site. So luckily, adding the Facebook catalog, overdrive, and Nebraska access buttons is all pretty much the same thing, but just using different images. So let's go into the dashboard here, and I'm going to go into appearance and widgets on the left-hand side here. And we have a question about the sidebar items are linked. And I'm assuming that means you're using that links plugin that I talked about before that is getting phased out. And so what I'm doing right now is I'm going through website by website and I'm changing that plugin so that instead of pulling all the info from the plugin itself, it's just a list of links. And so what I'll do here is a demonstration of what that list of links looks like. So I'll do a resource links. All right, so I opened up appearance and widgets. And so a lot of times your theme is going to have it in the right sidebar, which is where my default training theme is. And I'm using the Nirvana theme. Depending on the theme your library is using, this might look a little bit different. But by default, all of the available areas that can contain widgets are on the right-hand side here. And the custom sidebar is actually, it's a plugin, but it's not going to be supported for very much longer because WordPress is changing the way that they do sidebars. So a custom sidebar is no longer necessary because WordPress made it possible by default. But what we're going to cover over right now isn't going to change with the new update. You're still going to be able to put stuff into this right sidebar, just like I'm about to go over. So you can click it open and all of the widgets that are currently in here will show up on your dropdown. So these ones that say image down below, this is the clickable image that will be available that all you really need is a link, like an image that you want people to click, and then it links over to the website that you want them to go to. So in this case, it's going over to this nebraska.overdrive, which is Nebraska Overdrive. And if you don't have access to this image, I can share it out and you can just kind of grab it, download it, and pop it in there. So you can also in the chat let me know if there are any buttons that you want made available. I've got an overdrive button, a Nebraska overdrive button. Then I've got a catalog button in a variety of different colors. I've also got a template so that you can make it the color that you want. And it uses GIMP, which is a free image editing tool. All you really have to do is open up the template, grab a color that you want, hit the little paint box, the little paint button, and then drop it in there. And I'll show you how to add new images here, or new widgets on the side. On the left-hand side are your available widgets. And you can grab the image button. You'll click it, drag it, and drop it. So if you wanted to add a catalog button, you would click on Add Image. And then I'm going to go into Upload Files. First, I'm going to open up my regular files and I'm going to remind myself where I saved this because I don't remember. I'm pretty sure I put it in my documents, but let's find out. Okay, online catalog, it is in my documents. So select file, document, search for catalog, and I will grab this aqua color one, but you can see I have a bunch of different colors of it. We'll open it. And so when you first upload an image, it's also going to ask you if you want to have any attachment display settings, and it'll ask you if you want to link it to a URL. So the person who asked about linking an image over to your Amazon account, this is another way that you can do it. So you can see that I just uploaded that image, and by default, it's asked me if I want these attachment display settings. You can pop in the URL. So you can put the URL in here, but in this case, I'm going to add it to the widget. And now the URL to your catalog is going to go to this links to button. And I don't have a catalog button. I don't have a link to a catalog right now, so I'm just going to go to a random one. I probably could have used Follett. I think more people use Follett than they use Koha, but whatever. It's just an example. And so in the title, if you had wanted to, we could have added catalog on here, but then on the page, it would actually have a heading that said catalog, and then it would say online catalog, which is a little redundant since it already says it. But you could say click image for catalog. And then we'll save it. And then you can go up to this, the title of your page. We'll go to visit site. I'll right click and open it in a new link. And then we'll scroll down to where it says that online catalog. So in this one, it doesn't have that heading on there, but you just click it open and it goes there. And click it open. This isn't even the actual catalog, it's just a Koha community, but whatever. And so this is what would happen if an image is no longer loaded in your media library. You're just going to get this random box. And if you don't have anything in the alt text, then nothing is going to show up and it's just going to be this random box. So let's go into our widget area and find out where this box is and add an image into it. We'll go back into the widgets and go into this image. So this is what happens if you put in a links to, but you forget to add an image into it. So you can replace the image, and let's grab an overdrive button, which I think I also put into my documents. Maybe I didn't. Maybe it's in my picture. It is. Okay, so it is in my randomly in my download. So let's go to my download. I'll search for overdrive. And so I have two different, actually three. So this is a white version. Control. So I have a white version, a dark blue version, a Libby button, and then a Nebraska overdrive button. And what I want to do is actually reformat this so that it's a little bit taller and it shows up a little bit more prominent on the screen like this. So it'll be the same height as this overdrive button, but with larger text. But I'm going to grab this dark blue overdrive, then add it to the widget and save it. Then I'll reload this. And the image shows up. So whenever you're designing a button for this, just make sure that you're using larger text than you normally would have. Otherwise, you'll still be able to read it, but it's not going to be quite as prominent on the screen and it's not as eye-catching. And you can either add this click image for catalog or just people know that they can click on it to open it. And then this one, I've embedded the words click here into the button itself, so you didn't have to add anything to it. So you could even add on like below the, make the book a little smaller or make this text a little smaller and add a click here, right in this empty gap here. So there's options. And so now I'll show you how this links button would work. So right now this links is actually pulling from the plugin, but I want to make it so that it is just a regular list and that it's not linked over to that, that separate plugin. So that's actually pretty easy to do. I'm going to go into the widgets here and I'm going to go into this available widgets on the side, on the left-hand side here. I'll scroll down until I find text and I'll drag this up and pull it up. Let's put it right below text and hours. Local resources. And then we'll add a bulleted list and Nebraska access. DMV. Nebraska memories. And ooh, I'm having a hard time thinking about random stuff. Yearbooks. I probably wouldn't put yearbooks in here, but it's all I can think of right now. If you have yearbook archives, then why not? So now I'm going to grab the link to Nebraska Access. I'm pulling that open on my other monitor here. So now I copy and pasted that link. Then I'll highlight this Nebraska Access, hit the little chain link. When you hover over it, it'll say insert and edit link. So I click it, copy and paste that URL in here, and then I'll go to link options and open the link in a new tab and hit update. So now I always hit that open a link in a new tab so that when people click the link, it opens in a separate tab instead of taking people away from the library website. So people still have the option to go back to the library website from whence they came. And so you would just do the same copy highlight and insert the link for each one of these different things on the list. Hit save on here. And then we'll go into the regular website. And I'll scroll clear to the top here. And now you've got the local resources. I only added the link to the one so far, but you can add in the other ones for whatever you want to put in there. And then you click it open and your regular site is still there. All right, and let me go back into the site here. Oh, city website. Yeah, that's a good one. All right, so you kind of know how to add a Facebook catalog overdrive and pretty much any clickable link button. You pretty much just go into the widgets, grab your image, upload it, and copy paste that link into it, then hit save, and you're good. So then I went over how to do that list of resource links that you can just add in here. And this links here, we're going to delete it. So you can hit this, you can open up an existing widget, hit the delete key, and get it gone. So then the other thing we were going to go over is how to add a list of events into your website. So up here, we've got the events widget here. And all I did to get that in here was there is an events over on this left-hand side, and this ties into the event calendar. So I dragged and dropped this over here, and then it'll ask me how many different events I want to display in the sidebar. It was defaulted to 5, and it'll ask you what you want this widget to be titled. So you can call it events, you can call it programs, activities, coming up next, or whatever you want to call it. And then you can let it know how you want to organize it. And usually it's by upcoming and then like coming up most recently and then later on. And then you'll be able to go down and hit the save button. I've already added it in here, so it grayed out the save, but the first time you add it in, it'll ask you to do it. And I'm going to close my marker here so I don't accidentally draw on myself, which I've done before. And let me go over into my main page here, and I'll reload it. So we had the hours and contact info, which is a text block. And I just added in the regular text and hit save. And down here, you'll see that there are no events in our events block. So the big question is, how do we get events to show up? And that is what we're going to go over right now. So I know that there were several questions about the calendar. So over the course of Nebraska libraries on the web, there have been a lot of different calendars that have been in use. And some of the calendars have been phased out, but the ones that the one that I recommend the most right now is called events. And there's a little icon that has it looks like a little shield that's pretending to be a calendar. And I recommend this because it supports recurring events, and it supports this sidebar widget on here. And it also supports a display as an actual calendar or a display as a list of events. So I'm going to go into events and add event. And this will just take a second to load. All right, so this one is basically just filling out a form. So if you wanted to do a story hour, and there will be a brief description, come to story hour Wednesday at 1 p.m. or whenever it happens to be. Bring your littles and their friends. And then you can put in the date and time on the right-hand side here. So we'll say that this is coming up Wednesday, the 11th, and it's going to the 11th. So it's just a 1 hour, 1 day event. And it's going at, we said it was at 1 p.m. So let me put in not 1 a.m. No one wants to be up that early. Or I guess up that late, depends on how you think about it. And 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Then we set the time zone. And for some reason, they didn't say like Central Time, Eastern Time. They went by the city. So you have to type in Chicago to get the time zone for Central. And then if you scroll down to the bottom here, you'll see kind of the link that people are going to be able to use to get into it. I usually don't mess around with this because it's just a link. And you can also set your location type. So if the library tends to partner with different organizations and host events in different locations around the community, you might want to use this location type if you are helping to kind of market and advertise for other events. But if all of your events are in one area, then I would just skip this and say no location because people are going to know where it is. It's on the library website. You're going to the library. So if it's just at the library, then skip it. But you can also add a physical location if you had wanted to. And I usually disable the comments on this one down below just because it's easier. You'll be able to notice the comments better if you funnel people over to the contact us form instead of asking people to comment on the event itself, because that just gives you as the librarian more places to check. And it also opens the door for more spam. So you might run into a lot of times where people say, but I asked you a question like a month ago and you never responded. And you find out that they commented on some random event page that you just, how would you know to look? And if there is additional information about the event, you can also send people over to a separate URL. But half the time you don't need to do that. 9 times out of 10, all you really need is a title, this description, time, date, good. Then you publish it. And this will just take a second. I'm waiting for this little dot to stop bouncing back and forth so that I know that it stopped loading. And still waiting on the dot. Then I'll go back to the main site. I'll refresh it. And I just right click on this tab and hit the refresh. And now our story hour is showing up in the events tab. So events supports a single one-time event, and it also supports recurring events. So if you want a recurring event, it's basically the same thing, but all you do is go into events, recurring events. And so if you have like a library board meeting the first Wednesday of every month, then you can pop that information in there. And so we've got our recurring event, add recurring event in the top corner here. Then we'll add a title, library board meeting. And meets the first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. in the community room. And then you can go down here and say that it starts at 7 p.m. And I'm just going to type it. And say that it ends at 8. Then we'll type in Chicago because they weirdly don't let me just say Central. And then this event repeats monthly every 1 month on the first, did I say Wednesday? Yes, the first Wednesday of each month. So 7 to 8 monthly every 1 month on the first Wednesday, starting on this week through 2030. So if you have dates that basically just never change, then you can set it to Timbuktu and you're good to go. And it's only a 1-day event. It's not a festival or something like that. So we'll publish it. And same thing with the other type of event, you can set a location, and this also supports some bookings and registration as well, if you had wanted to set that up. And now I'll reload this. And now the library board meeting is going to set in here. So as you add more events, oh, that'd be fun. Library Board Festival. 3 days of Library Board Festival. And so this is going to kind of indicate how many different events that you want listed on here. So if you have like a recurring story hour and a library board meeting, and that's the only 2 events that you had loaded in there, then you might want to load it so that it only displays 2 of them at a time. And if you have like a multiple different things that are mixed in, you might want to have 5, 6, or even more listed on there. So it just depends on what you've got loaded on there, if they're recurring events, and what you want people to see on there. And you can also display this event in your regular website. Let me see if I've already done that. Yes, I did. So by default, when you start using the events calendar, it'll add in an events page and it'll show up as events on your site. And it'll start this list panel. And so I usually actually recommend keeping this as a list because sometimes as a calendar format, it can be a little bit difficult to read it sometimes because it's a little difficult to see inside those smaller boxes. And sometimes when you are reading it on a phone, it'll look a little bit different. But when you're just reading the list format, it's a lot easier to make out where things are, what they are, when they are. And you can also change the settings out. So if you go into the events and settings, and this will just take a second to load here. All right, so we'll go into the pages across the top here and event pages. So you can change the format of the page on which this is displayed. So if you are using an actual calendar format, it will be easier for people to read as a full width page instead of scrunched in using the sidebar, or you can just keep it as the list option. And you can also change out the page that this is located on. So right now this is on the event list page. So if you do the drop down here, you can also embed the events on a different existing page. So you could put it onto library services, or you can put it on, you can pretty much put it anywhere. If you don't want this to be called events, you can start a blank page called calendar and then go to the settings and pages, event list, and change it from events page to calendar. And then your page will say calendar in the menu instead of events. And then you can also change the way that this is displayed. So let's go up here and to formatting and calendar. So you can change it out so that it is, this starts to get like a little bit, more often than not, you're just going to keep the format just exactly as it is. But this is just going to be showing the order that so it'll be day, month, year. And sometimes the reason that they make this, the reason that they make it able for you to change it is because in the UK, they put it in a different order. But here, this is a good order. So I like it. And so do we have any questions about how to format the calendar, how to display it, and different ways that you might want to do it? So the registrations, you can set up an email, and let me just go in here. So event, yeah, no. Oh, and you asked for a recurring event. The process is the same for registration, but let me open this up and I'm going to edit it. We'll go down to the booking and registration. Bookings. So this is where it's going to ask you to set a fee. So if you're doing like a mini maker activity and there's a fee to pick up the kit, then you can put that in here. And there's different ways that you can collect the fees for that, but this will just let people know that this is available. If it's capped out for the number of people who can attend, you can cap out the number of available spaces, and then the booking system will let people know how many spaces are available. And we'll go into this edit ticket. So this is where you would put in the basic description. You can say make and take kit. I know there's a different phrasing people use for that, but it's what I've got and you get the idea. Come to the library and grab a kit that you can keep, that you can complete and keep at home. Kits are $10 and can be picked up between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. anytime this week. And so if there are 25 kits, 25 kits, this would be the spaces so that people know that 12 kits have already been claimed. And you can put in the dates. So if you're doing the make it take it from Monday the 15th at, you can make it 1 o'clock in the morning because it doesn't matter when it opens up. And if you're doing it, if you're making it open for 2 weeks, then you can close it at 11:30 p.m. and you can make it available for everyone. And if you do want to, you can kind of set up a login system so that you don't get people from outside the county trying to use the system, because you might not be able to track who it is. but, and close ticket editor. So this is what your ticket system would look like. And then it would basically just, as people register for it, it would take a kit off, take a kit off, take a kit off, and say like 4 out of 25 have been claimed, and it'll just track it. And add a new ticket and advanced options. So you can kind of play around with the settings that you prefer for that one. And you can also add a booking cutoff date if you want to extend out the, if you want to say like this event has been extended for a week or something like that. And I still actually have yet to play around with the login system to see what that looks to the user. I've always just said for everyone. And there hasn't really been a problem with it, but you never know. So if you do want to play around with login system, or if you want to email me and say, can we check this out and test it for whatever, we can do that. All right, so let me close this, and I'll actually update this so you can see what that looks like. Reload. I'm waiting for the dot to stop bouncing up here. Still bouncing. And I'm going to reload this events. Go into the story hour. And then you'll be able to choose. So if they have 2 kids, they want 2 tickets or 2 spaces. And Janet booking. And so in here, you can say to book a ticket, add your name into the comments and sign up. And then it'll send the booking. Now we'll go back in here and go into your bookings. And you have your booking in here. We didn't put a cost in here, so nothing is being collected. And your booking will be listed down here. And then you can go into your settings in here. So we have a question about where under events do I find tickets? So you would open up the event, and when you add in your new event, you can scroll clear down to the bottom where it says bookings, check the box that says allow bookings, and then that little menu will pop open. And then you can also change the settings for your bookings so that you can customize the options that are available. And so I would keep this approval required just in case you get some random spam on there that is just some random dude out of Timbuktu trying to get a ticket. And so you can kind of play around with the settings that'll work with like your library policies and what you want to put on there. And then you can add in this is basically just a currency thing. It's going to be US dollars. And you can also put in a customized feedback so that when people submit their ticket, it'll pop up a little message that says that thank you for submitting or booking successful, or you'll just be able to customize the message that people get bounced to them after they've completed booking. And I'm trying to find here, there it is. So there's also different form options on here and ticket options. So you can customize what people are going to be able to see and what people have to enter in there in this booking section. And let me just check the comments to see if there are any questions on here. We have a question about, do you still have the add to Facebook option on posts? So Facebook got weird with that. So Facebook had to change their privacy policy so they can't share any data with third-party sites unless it's under like a pro version. So basically now if you want to forward and share your WordPress posts to Facebook, they put it behind a paywall, which is unfortunate. But yeah, so the version that we used to use, it doesn't work anymore. I'm still testing out the Jetpack version to see if that's a good option. But so far when I tested it, it hasn't done what I wanted it to do. It shared the post, but it didn't take any of the images. It only sent the text. And since a lot of times libraries will only use like a PDF image or a JPEG for advertising, and if that forward doesn't include any images, it really doesn't do much good. So yeah, so far, no, they don't support that anymore. All right, and I still have to actually explore the booking options on here a little bit more, but if anyone has any questions about that or they want to experiment with it, let me know. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to my agenda here. So we went over the calendar, we went over sidebars, we went over how to add a widget. So now the last section on my list here is setting up the home page, planning it out, and figuring out a schedule to stay on top of your website. So it is 3:56. We're going to take another break and we'll get started at 4:05. All right, so I'm going to pop back into the main page here while I'm waiting for everyone to get situated. Close out the things I don't need. All right, let's talk about home pages. So there's a few different formats that are pretty popular. One of them, the one you get by default, is this blog posting. So if you could, what kind of homepage do you like to use? Do you use the blog posting? Do you use a static page that has the featured events? Or do you have have you seen a website with a homepage that you really liked that you might want to try out? Oh, it's a good time to sip my tea again. I'm about down to here, and it usually takes one Ninja Turtle mug to get through one workshop. So we'll see how it goes. All right, so we've got one person with a blog page. One person like so St. Edward's has the static page that has the content on it. So here's what I'll do. I'll just show you how to do one of each of them. and kind of different ways that you might be able to do it. So this is kind of what happens by default. When you first set up a website and you start, like if you were to start Nebraska libraries on the web from scratch, this is basically what it would look like. Your nav bar, your navigation menu wouldn't be quite as much of a mess because I didn't just add a million random test pages to it, but this is pretty much what you get. And so I'm going to go into the main dashboard here. I'll scroll up to the top and go into posts and all posts. So the blog posting is called post in the dashboard. So this is a listing of kind of the sample posts that I put in there. And I put in, this is basically just random instructions for how to do a post. So we just add a new one. And you'll see that a lot of this is pretty similar to adding a page. You're just putting it in a slightly different spot. So I'm not going to dig too much into adding a lot of this content because it's pretty much exactly the same. So we'll add a title, story hour on Wednesday. And you can either add in a little blurb of text, which is you pretty much just type a paragraph, or you can hit the plus sign and you can add an image or a PDF that is basically advertising the event. So you can just pop in your image. I don't even remember why I had downloaded that from Pixabay, but I'll take it. Right, so let me hit the plus sign on here. You can also add a little blurb on here that says, this week we're doing Zoom with audio effects. Zoom the children's book, not Zoom the platform we're on right now. Just thought I'd mention. Then I'll go to publish it. And this is another one that you can schedule your post to go out later. So you can schedule your post for a month on just one day and just get it out of the way. But in this case, we're just going to publish it right now. So we'll go to publish and I'll reload the page. Just right click it and go to reload. Your browser might say refresh, but does the same thing. And then we'll get the new post that shows up on top. And up here, it'll say the person who posted it, and then it'll say the date it was posted. And it'll also say any categories that you may have attached to it. So in this case, it would be events or activities. And here's a little blurb down below that I had put on there. And there's also so if you do have a bookings event in there, you can also attach it in. So you can include your events on there. Ooh, I had a moment. I'm in the wrong page. That's kind of funny. I just used the blog posting story hour. I was in the events. So it looked exactly the same, but it was the wrong page. So this is your home page right here. And this is your blog posting. So here is your image and it'll say who wrote it, date it was written or date it was published, and the category. So you can see that the blog posting is actually kind of similar to categorizing the events. So you can also tie those two in together. And fun fact, if you're doing your reporting for your library at the end of the year, you can set it up so that your events calendar, you can add categories to it, and then you can pull your reporting to find out how many events you had in each different category and how many postings you had for each category, and then just pull that number and pop it into the report and then makes it a lot easier to say how many events you did and what kind. Just a fun fact. And so that's basically how you would use the blog posting. This is really good if you have time to update your blog just on a pretty regular basis. But if you know that you're probably not going to have a ton of time to update the blog, then it's probably better to use a different style of homepage. And in this case, it would be like the example that I had shown from here. I'll just pull it up. And this will take a second to load. So this kind of static page that just kind of has the featured items and different things that you can do with the library. So what I'll do now is kind of show you how to do something like this. And so the way that you do this will look a little different based on the theme that you're using. The example I'll use is using the Nirvana theme, which is kind of the default recommended that I use because it's responsive. And responsive basically just means when you change the size of the window and look at it on different devices, it's still, you can still read the text and it still looks good. All right, so I'm going to go into appearance and Nirvana settings. If you're using a different theme, you're not going to see Nirvana settings. You'll see the settings from your specific theme. If your theme doesn't have additional settings, all you'll have is this customize section that'll let you change out the header and change out the site identity, which is that title across the top. But I like Nirvana because it lets you change more stuff. So the way that I got this to look like this is by going into the presentation page. And instead of saying, so by default, it'll say disable presentation page, but I enabled it. And then I disabled showing the posts on the presentation page because I didn't want those blog postings to show up if you aren't really going to have time to update them too much. So I just took them off of there. And so if you remember North Bend's site here, and I'll open this. And every time I have multiple WordPress sites logged in and open, it takes a little longer to load. But this little slider menu here, this is actually this setting here. So the slider settings where it says slide into the left is how that slideshow actually showed up there. And you can change if you don't want that slideshow to show up at all, you can disable it. But you can also just keep it as it is. So I'll show you how to do it both ways, just so you get a feel for how it'll look. So right now the top slide is still active. And these widget columns are where these are stored. So the widget columns are actually they are randomly in a different setting. I don't know why they set it up this way, but there it is. So I left this on here. And the text area is going to be some random text that shows up down below the whole bottom of the thing. So what I'll do now is I'm going to save the changes and show you what it looks like right now. And I'm waiting for this to stop bouncing. I'll reload it. So this was the original with the blog posting, and this is what it turns into. So now you've got the slider. You can change this background image to something else if you had wanted to, and you can change this text to whatever you happen to want to. And then when you scroll down, these are the column sections. So this is like a little random section of information. And these are the columns. So right now it's set so that when you hover over it, that text will appear. But I like to actually have it so it's one on top of the other, because sometimes it's easier for people to navigate if they're on a mobile device or something like that. So let me go back into our presentation page settings over here. And I'm going to scroll on down to the text area. So the first thing that I want to do is, if you don't want this text down here, you can go in here into this text area to get rid of it. So all you have to do to wipe this out is just highlight it, backspace, highlight it, backspace. Then I'll get rid of this and get rid of this and this and that. And it's gone. And you can also use this extra section to hide specific areas on the site. So if you don't want anything to show up in the footer, or if you don't want the copyright area to show up in the footer, you can hide it down here. And you can also hide so there's a little social media menu and a top menu, and you can hide it just by clicking this check mark. So right now it looks like this across the top. If you check that box, this hide the top bar and including the social area and top menu, and go to save changes. And I will go into, I'm waiting for it to stop bouncing. So then I'll reload it. And this is gone. So if you want this flush across the top, then checking that box will make it happen. All right, so now if you want to be able to customize the way that those columns look, the way that these columns right here look. So we're going to go into, we're down to the widget columns. This section is where you would set how many columns per row will show up on the screen. So if you make them 2, it's going to have 2 columns. You can make it one larger image with the text that goes over the top. And you can also change the sizing if you want a wider gap of white space in the middle. But I'm going to save this just in case. And if you want to change this title, you can say, come to the library. Oh, it's saved, so I have to retype that. So if you don't want this to randomly say there will be columns, you can say library services or come to the library, or whatever you happen to want to call it there. Then you save it, go into appearance and widgets, and you're going to go into the columns area. So we'll go to appearance, widgets, and I'm going to close these again so it's a little quicker to load here. So now we're going into the presentation page columns, which shows up after we activate that presentation page. And this will let you customize how those pages look. And let's see, it's 421. I'm just debating whether I want to do all this from scratch or if I just want to show you what it looks like. So I will actually just show you what it looks like. And so I'm going to go into, because I just did this pretty recently. Appearance, widgets, feel like this is taking longer and longer to load between each one now. So this is how I did it. This presentation page on this right-hand side, it has the cry out column section. So I went to the left-hand side here. I found the cry out column and I dragged and dropped it over here. And then when you open up this section, it'll ask you to put in the title and the text here. And if you have any link that you want to say like learn more or something like that, this is where you would map people over to click on that link. And on the screen, it would it would show a little button that says learn more. So you can shoot people over to the right page. Then you hit save. And this is how I got that all of those sections to show up. So it's basically just the image I wanted to show up, the title, and the text. And then that's how the columns worked. And so do we have any questions about anyone who might want to try that homepage look? And a lot of it might just be kind of playing around with it. All right, so let me go back into my Nirvana settings here. So a lot of these themes will also let you change the color theme. So in this case, you can change the font that appears on there. You can, and it's basically just a drop-down menu where you pick the font that you want. And if that font doesn't appear well on your browser, it'll just default to this Google font or whatever you tell it to do. And then you just save it and it does what you tell it to. And you can also change the way that your layout looks with this. So with this one, you can also, the responsiveness by default is enabled on this layout. I don't know why you would ever actually want to disable it, but it's an option. And you can also change the default layout to have no columns or have two columns on one side or a column on either side, depending on how you want to lay out your information. But one thing that I kind of mentioned about that is the more sidebars you have, the less space you have for content in the middle, and the harder it can be for people to focus on one thing at a time. So the more menus you have, the more it distracts attention and the less you can fit in the side. And so by default, this is kind of a pretty good width of it. So a lot of like this 1200 pixel width is a pretty good size just because you might have a little bit of a white space on the side, but some monitors, that is just kind of the default size. So it's just kind of the recommended size to use. And if you remember, I said that I would let you know how to download an image from Pixabay so that you might be able to spice up your header image a little bit. And that is what we're going to do now. So I'm going to open up Pixabay's website. Pixabay. And no, if you mess around with stuff, it will not blow up. I promise. All right, so I just searched for books in Pixabay. And let's see what might make a good header here. Let's try, and what I keep in mind is that these are going to be cropped down. Let's try this one. This could be kind of fun. So let's go to free download. And I usually default it to the 1920 by 1280 because this 1280 is kind of the recommended pixel size across because you're able to crop it down to the size you need. So I'll download it. It's going to ask me if I'm a human. I am indeed. And download it. Save the file. So now I'm going to go back into Nirvana settings and the header settings, and then I'll define a header image. Oh, I am still on St. Edward's site, so I am going to not mess with their header and go into my training site. That would be unfortunate. All right, so now I'm going into appearance. I am glad I noticed that before I did anything. No, Vicky, I promise I won't. All right, so I'm going to go to appearance and Nirvana settings. And I'm just going to double check St. Edward's site to make sure that I didn't do anything with it, which I'm 99% certain that I didn't, but I'm going to double check. Okay, we're good. All right, so define header image, and this time I am actually in. I'll close St. Edward's site so we don't mess with it. Then I'll go into the training site. We're in the training site. I'll go to the header settings, define header image, and I'm going to grab that image that I just downloaded of those books. All right, so I'll browse for a new image, grab this one, open it, and upload. So when I upload it, it's going to ask me to crop a little section of this that's going to be used for the header. And let me just kind of line it up. I just grab this and crop and publish. So now the site now looks like visit site and open link in new tab. So this is where you can either change the color of your site identity. I would probably make this all white so that it's easier to read it on there. Or you can change out this background image so that you can test for readability and make sure that you're able to read all of the font and all of the text that is going across this header image. And so this is kind of like a good example of being able to test readability, because can you read this font against this kind of busy looking text background? And it's kind of hard to do. So I would probably use something a little closer to something with some more white space on here. And so what I usually try to frame up is having like an empty little section of nothing on the corner so that your text can fit over that little section. So something a little closer. I would probably want like a little more space than this, but let's try this because you never know. I am indeed not a robot. And then I'll browse it, grab that new image, upload it. Then I'm going to pull this down here because I want to grab just the corner of this book image. Oh. And this is a little blurred out for my tastes, but I'll try it. Crop and publish. So a lot of this is kind of trial and error to find out what works. And I'm going to reload it. So you can see that it's a lot easier to see the text, but this is also weirdly blurred out. So it might take a few tries just to get an image that will actually work for the top of it. And this one, so this would actually have a crisper line than this would. So you can also kind of try playing around with something like this so that your text would be a light color over this darker image. And you can also try something like this. So you would clip this little mini section and you'd have the edge of the book in here. And you would still kind of have that ambiance to it. This one would be harder to crop because it's hard, you would get that blurred out edge again. So it's more or less kind of playing around with it and finding out which clip works best. All right, so let me go back in here. Oh, this could actually be a good one with the side of the stacks, but it would probably blur out a little bit. And you can also use these for background ambiance. So even though this one didn't work very well for a background and a header, let's try it in a background in that rotating slideshow. So I'm going to go into Nirvana settings. So I went to appearance and Nirvana settings. Now I'm going to go into that slider. So the custom slides, I'll open up slide 1 and I'm going to upload that book image. And so it grabbed the cropped version. I'm going to grab an uncropped version here. And I'll insert it into the post. Scroll clear down to save the changes. And we're going to wait for this to stop bouncing. And then I'll refresh this. It almost works, but not quite. It's still a little difficult to read. So, but that is how you would change out that background image so that you can kind of spice up the front page with using that slider. And this is what that read more button would say, that you can link people over to other pages on your site or external sites if you want to sign people up for like a summer reading event or something like that. All right, so this kind of column section is probably one of the more common ways that it's kind of a cleaner layout to being able to display your library services. And this kind of slider is a really good full color image that you can use to display different events and upcoming things at the library. And you can also use kind of a gallery style thing that is basically really image forward, that shows what's coming up and different featured things and featured collections. All right, so let me go back onto my page planning here. So in terms of figuring out, okay, so you've got your entire website set up and ready to go. What do you have to do after it's all set up? Like, how would you maintain it over time? So my question for you is, across the things that we just went over, what would you say needs updating the most? What would you actually change over and over again? And I'm going, for reference point, I will open up this menu here again. So we've got our library services. So new reads, new books, definitely. And down here, I'm going to put in maintenance schedule. What needs to be maintained? And we've got new books, events and programs, COVID changes, additional services, well, changes to services, and I'll put in blog postings if your library likes to use blog postings, featured events on homepage, and let me go back up here. Let's see if there's anything else on here. You could do featured activities for like a children's area or a makerspace. If you have any rotating collections or if you have any new additions to special collections. So featured activities, featured tutorials, YouTube videos, community events, and a lot of times the local resources pretty much stays the same. Like if you're linking out to a local calendar or like local history, that pretty much stays the same. And let's see what else on here might need to be updated. So we pretty much have the events on there. But these button links will pretty much stay the same. Overdrive stays the same. Hours and COVID walk hand in hand. So now the question is, how do you stay on top of updating this stuff if it needs to be updated on your site? So the big question is, who is updating and when? So is it going to be you that does all the updating? Do you have volunteers that are coming in and doing it? Do you have library staff that are doing it? And can you schedule, as Tammy says, can you schedule post later and just kind of do it all at once? And you can schedule posts and pages. And when will you block off time to get it done? And what I found is that it's easier to just kind of basically say, I'm going to take this day to just make all my updates and schedule all my updates, and then just kind of get it done. And then you don't have to worry about it for the next like couple weeks or a month or so. And then you know that it's just being refreshed all the time. And if you happen to be recruiting people that are helping to update the website, then you can also make like a one massive list of things that would need to be changed. If you have different people coming in all the time, then they can look at that one master list and just check off stuff on a month by month. You can even print out that a list just like the one I just typed up, and you can laminate it and then get like a little dry erase and then have people check it off and then erase it at the end of the month and start it fresh. You can even do that for yourself. I'm the only one who updates a lot of my websites, and I've actually gone the lamination route or the whiteboard route and just written it all out and then checked it off and started the whole mess fresh the next month. And then making sure that you have just kind of maintaining that list and making sure that you have a time assigned and a person assigned to be doing each thing. Otherwise, it just kind of never gets done. So it's one of those things that is how you keep on top of it. All right, so let me go back into my agenda, make sure that I am not missing anything on here, and then we'll go on to the last little section, the last section on here to wrap up. All right, so we kind of went over some different common homepage settings. We went over how to do the traditional blog post listing. Then we went over how to do the column setting, and we went over how to do the featured services on that homepage. So what I'll do now is I'll show you how to play around with different themes, and you can test them out without actually committing to the change until you know it's what you want to do. So I'm going to go into my dashboard here, and then so I'll go into appearance and themes. And I'm going to give this a second to load. I'm going to close these other tabs so that it'll go a little faster. So these are the themes that are preloaded into and preloaded and available. Some of these have been on there forever and a day, and others are kind of a newer theme that is more responsive. So this Astra, Nirvana, this Boda, Catchbox, Chip Life, and Dara, those are responsive themes. And so this 2010 Weaver was actually made in 2010, so it hasn't been updated super recently. But I would recommend some of these themes that kind of, you can see that these have just like a little bit different of a layout, and that they're kind of more image forward than anything else. And that's kind of the more recent theme that's been popular. These kind of like giant images that are on top and like the clean menu header, and then the designated content areas down below. You can see these like content areas. And what you want to do when you're testing out a new theme is say that we want to switch from Nirvana over to Astra. You can do a live preview by clicking in this bottom right. And we'll wait for this to load. And still loading. So it'll give you a preview of what your current site would look like using the new theme. And you can test out different changes and different settings in the theme before you actually commit to it. And so you can test out what your header would look like. You can try out you can add any library logos or local community logos that you might want. And you can also change out the image on the header. You can try out what that would look like. Apparently Astra is defaulted to a transparent header. And you can go back here, and then you can change out the way that your homepage looks. And so on the regular WordPress settings, there is also another way that you can, instead of making your blog page your default homepage, which is what happens by default every time, you can also create a new page in WordPress, and then you can choose a static page and turn that page into your home page. So you can even turn your library resources or new raids page into your home page. And that way you don't have to mess around with any additional theme settings or anything like that. And so just by making that simple change, you have like a whole new look for your homepage. So if you don't want to mess around with all the different settings in Nirvana or in a different theme, just create a new page that looks the way that you want it to look, and then go into this custom homepage setting, choose a static page, and choose the page that you want as your homepage. And you just made your life a whole lot easier. And so let's go back here. And then you can also play around with the way that your widgets are going to look to make sure that this heading and this widget section looks good in the way that you want your theme to look. And once you have this looking the way that you want, and you know that this is the theme you want, you can hit activate and publish. Your real site won't be affected until after you hit this button. And you can always hit this X button and say, this will ask you the changes you've made will be lost if you navigate away from this page. But if you don't want those changes, and just hit OK. And you'll go back into that theme section so you can test out a different theme before you commit to it. And I'm just waiting for this to stop bouncing back and forth. So then you would be able to go through and try out a different theme like this Dara theme. And we'll go to live preview to see what that looks like. And you can also play around with the different color settings on here to change the way that this menu looks and find out if what you need to be customizable is actually customizable in that theme, and then choose it if you like it. Or just scrap the whole mess and make a different page your home page, and you don't have to worry about the whole thing. All right, and yeah, this one definitely doesn't have as many custom options as Nirvana does. But sometimes that doesn't actually make a difference. If you don't want to customize a whole ton of stuff, then you don't really need the options to customize. So let me close this because I don't want to activate this as my new theme. But that is basically how you would kind of test drive a new theme just to find out if you like it. And did we have any questions about how themes work, if there are any other recommended themes? And there's a question about how do you get the Facebook links to go to your Facebook? And I'll show you how to do it in Nirvana. So if you go into Appearance and Nirvana Settings, and I'll go into this site. So we go to the training site, visit site. What I'm doing now is there's a setting where you can make the social media buttons show up on the top and the side menus of your website. So let's go up here, and I'm going to go into the presentation page. I'll reactivate that social media area just by unchecking that box. And then I'll go into the social media settings, and I'm going to put the social media display on the right side. Actually, the sidebar is on the right side. I'll put it on the left side. And I'll put it into the right sidebar. And now you have link 1 that is going to Facebook. So there'll be a Facebook icon. And you would copy and paste your Facebook link. I don't have a Facebook link option right now, so I'm just going to say www.facebook.com. And if you don't have any of these other options, you can uncheck them and save the changes. And then you can go into, I'm waiting for this to stop bouncing back and forth here. Still going. And then I'll refresh it. So now this is back here and your social media icons are back here. And then when you click it, I block myself from using Facebook during different time periods. So the like leech block shows up. But if I didn't have leech block, it would just load Facebook. And if you go into the for kids and teens, I'll just use this as a random page example. Then we look at the sidebar and the social media icons also show up here. And there is also a link to your blog posting, which you can link this RSS over to your blog if you happen to want to keep one maintained. All right, so let me close this and close this. And now I'm going to go back in here. And so these are some of the other options that you have in here. So if you do happen to have an Amazon Smile account, or if you have anything that's linked over for a donations page, you can also link people over to your Amazon account here. And then you would just pop in the link over here. And this is what would show up if when you are hovering over that button. Otherwise, it defaults to saying Amazon. And you can also checkbox it to say open in a new window. And save it. And these all have pre-made icons in the system to be able to pop it in there. I'm just waiting for this to stop loading. Go to visit site. And there's that Amazon icon. Oh, that is a really bad header image. It's really blurry. All right, so let me go back into our main page settings. And let's see if there's any major things that I missed here. I'm just going back through my agenda here. Right, so I think we pretty much covered everything here. So as you are looking at planning out your different websites, I would recommend that you start making a checklist of the different pages that you want to start making. And you can use this as kind of a reference point to make sure as like a brainstorming and to see what you want to add in, what you might want to switch up and different things like that. When you have this checklist together, you can start making a checklist of you can pre-write all of your content and then add in and you can pre-collect and start gathering all the images that you might want to add in. And once you have all the images collected and you have the content written, it makes it way easier to just go into your pages and just copy paste all the stuff that you had just written. So that is what I would recommend for organizing your stuff and getting all of your stuff into the website. This will go into pages, all pages. And this will make a life a whole lot easier. So you can just check things off as you get them done. All right, so I will share this out because it has probably gotten buried in a bunch of links already. But so the navigation menu and planning document. So if you want to reference that at any time, you can look at that. So that is where we did this is kind of the common categories that show up in here. and where we brainstormed our different topics and what you can call it in your menu. And so I'll call it menu heading. So you can use this as you are either revamping, planning, or building out your website. And if you would like to, you can also set up a one-on-one session with me if you want to plan out or work through specific items on your site. And are there any questions about WordPress, setting up a website, or anything like that? And you can either unmute or pop it into the chat. The manage calendar. I'm assuming that you mean this calendar. Where is it here? The settings and oh, where is it? Calendar. So this one, it does technically still work. It's kind of limping along. They haven't updated, the developer hasn't updated that calendar plugin in a long time. So what's been happening is that the calendar isn't displaying right, or it won't it'll display an empty blank calendar, but it won't display events for whatever weird reason. So I've been kind of shifting people over to that events calendar because it actually works still. And unless they start updating that calendar and the manage calendar, I might have to get rid of it pretty soon. Because right now it isn't working on half the websites. And yeah. And it's kind of taking a minute for me to go through about 135 plus websites to work through and clear out that old calendar to shift over to the new one. But eventually that calendar is going to disappear unless they eventually update it. But I'm kind of working through a really long list of libraries that are still using it and switching them over. But it's taken a minute. All right, so let me go in here. And I'm looking over a list of the plugins that are probably going to get phased out or definitely are getting phased out. The links is getting phased out. The calendar, manage calendar is getting phased out. The social like box and feed is getting phased out. I'm really hoping that Facebook and the other social media start getting something different because people use that a lot. But I don't know. So there's now the smart slider and the slideshow, and I'm going to keep one or both of those. The slideshows hasn't been updated recently, so I'm hoping that the developer keeps it up. If they don't, then it might stop functioning. But WordPress is also doing more updates, and they promised that they would add in more functions, and they said that slideshow was going to be one of them. So I'm hoping that you won't even need a plugin at all. It's just kind of built in, but we won't know until I am able to update it to the newest version. Fingers crossed. It would be easier if they just built it in. But otherwise, oh, and table press I'm getting rid of because it's now built into every website. You can just add a table into your site and you don't need the plugin to do it. And it's another one of those that I'm going through, like one by one to find out which libraries are using it, and then I have to shift it over, and that takes about forever and a day. So one day. All right. And so are there any other questions? Oh, can I copy and paste the content from current pages into a new theme? Yep, you can. So whenever you do a live preview for a page, the content that you had in that old page should carry over to the new theme. It might just look different and the headings might be a different color, but everything should carry over into it. So when you do this live preview, appearance, themes, and come on. So we're on Nirvana. Let's try Boda live preview. And you can test it by clicking open one of the pages. So click open just a random page. And you'll see that that text carries over, but the headings look a little different. So you shouldn't have to copy and paste everything over, but if you do need to, you can. And are there any other questions? All right, so I will put up my contact info if you do want to ask any questions later on down the line. And I will put that at the bottom of this document here. And I'll just put in questions. And I will also copy this into the chat. So if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me. And let me see if I can also, I should have memorized my phone number, but I haven't yet. So I can grab that. And outpost. There it is. There, and I will put it in the sheet. Other than that, that's about all I have for you. We're about 5 minutes past 5 o'clock. And Tammy, did you want to do anything to wrap up, or are we good to go?
I think we're good to go. Thank you so much, Amanda.
You're welcome.
A lot of information.
Yeah. It's kind of a lot to cover in a little bit of time, but it works. I think a lot of it is just playing around with it and testing out and getting it done.
Yep, experimenting.
Yeah. Cool. So I will hop off of here unless there are any other questions for me.
No, that was great. I appreciate it.
Oh, and if you have a list of the people who attended, I can get CE credit.
Okay, I will just send that to you then. And you
Perfect.
can do that. Thanks.
You're welcome. Oh, and let me see. I'm going to download this Zoom chat because someone asked me to email them some information and I wanted to grab their email address. There we go. Got it. Show in folder. and one last question. I have a teaching technology in the library workshop too. And so I'm doing it with, so Scott and Todd wanted me to do it with cells. And would you want to try it, like a version of it too?
Yes, I would love that.
Ooh,
And theirs is middle of April somewhere.
yep. And I know they opened it up to everybody, but it never hurts to kind of repeat it because sometimes it's better to do it
Well, I
section.
think they had limited of 15 maybe. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'll get with you, but I think maybe the last week in April would be great.
Yeah. And I can send over there's a flyer and there is if you prefer, you can make your own flyer because you might have a format that you prefer. And I can also have this workshop description and I'll just send over some info.
Yeah, that would be great. Are
And
you available the 27th? Shall we just go ahead and schedule it?
sure, let me pop open. I'm pretty sure I am, but let me pop open my calendar. Yeah,
I'm going to stop recording. Thank you.